Something rustled the big curtains behind her. The old woman looked up from her tablet and into the dark and ominous office she had installed inside the villa she now resided in. She could feel the cold chill in the air and even smelled the new odor wafting through the room. It was one she knew well. A slightly dusty, almost musky odor twinged with aftershave she hadn't smelled in years. Elona's lips formed a crooked smile as she put the tablet down on the giant mahogany desk that cost more than a car, then let herself sink back into a more comfortable position. This wasn't her first rodeo, she thought, and tried to calm down her own nerves. Years, well, decades of sitting atop the proverbial pyramid had steeled her. There wasn't anything in this world that could put her off balance. Many had tried. None had succeeded. From almost daily death threats to blackmail attempts to every other method imaginable. They all had tried to push her off her throne, and they all had failed time and time again. It wouldn't be different tonight. Well, maybe somewhat, she corrected herself in her thoughts. Normally, people, humans, tried to mess with her. Tonight's guest would be of another sort. She could feel it deep in her bones. And yet she didn't despair. That was something only weak people did. She had survived it last year, and tonight would be just one more repeat. Another senseless trip down memory lane. The light of the desk lamp flickered for a short moment, and Elona felt the temperature drop even more. It was starting. There was no running away from it. Nothing to do but face it down. Just the way she liked it. The smile on her lips quivered for a moment before Elona got herself back under control. It was important to not show any weakness. Like always. Her old hands touched the plate of the mahogany desk, and she felt a slight trembling in her extremities. Was that from tension or from age? She didn't know which option she hated more. Was she getting weak from age or losing her composure? Both of those things were unthinkable to her. Tonight, she couldn't show any weakness. As long as she stayed her normal self, it would end just like last year. The fluttering of the curtains behind her got more intense, and Elona felt the tension constricting her chest. It angered her. Was her own body betraying her already? She bit down and felt a drop of blood running from her lips, and quickly wiped it away. The pain was negligible, but her mind seemed to clear a bit, and with it, her composure returned. Light flickered as the coldest breeze yet hit her from straight ahead. She blinked involuntarily, then spotted the figure standing in the middle of the big office. How many times had she seen him like that? Hundreds? More. But that had been when he was alive. Seeing his dead apparition in her office had only happened once before. Last year. And back then, she had thought him a hallucination at first.
"Hello, Elona."
A voice cut through the silence as eyes fell upon her. Now, she knew what she was facing off against.
"Jacob. Back again for another round?"
Her tone was mocking, yet the apparition showed no sign of anger. Instead, he floated over the ground, coming closer and closer, while the chains hanging around his shoulders clinked slightly. The expression on his face was one of sorrow, yet she could still see hope in there. Elona wanted to spit on the floor. There was hardly anything that annoyed her more than having to refuse something for a second time. Normally, people who dared ask her after she had already denied them ended up in much worse circumstances for their trouble. She had gone out of her way to mess with some low-level executives after they had made that mistake. But only this time, there was a problem. Elona had no idea how she could make his existence worse. The man looked dreadful, tired, hurt, and frightened. Before he died, he had been a handsome man, one who had loved life and enjoyed the struggles they had faced together. Even as they got older, he had never looked as scared or disheveled as he did now. It would have been unthinkable for him. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, she thought with a wry grin. He was looking like he had gone through hell itself those past few years. Even worse than last time.
You know, old friend, if you're here for the same reason as last year, I don't like your chances.
She stared at his face and downtrodden eyes. There was no warmth in his gaze as he slowly lifted them to look at her. How many times had she seen him like this? Maybe once in all her life. There, in front of her, was her old business partner. The man who had come back with a smile after getting torn to shreds by magnates and lawyers, who had spat out blood onto her carpet after one of their customers had sent muscle after them, then asked for a whiskey neat with a grin. And now, he looked thoroughly beaten.
I'm afraid so,
he answered her, his eyes still full of sorrow.
But it's not like I get a say in who I visit, you know.
Elona wanted to offer him a drink, but thought better of it the next moment.
If you're the messenger again, just tell them that I'll think about it.
She instead stopped him from starting up last year's spiel.
Those three were, oh, so scary, you know.
She shook one hand and winked in mock indignation. Yes, she had felt fear last year. There was no point in denying that. But only at first. As soon as she had found out that the ghosts that had shown her what they perceived as her faults weren't able to physically hurt her, she had calmed down. The first one taking her through a tour of her own life when she had been younger, for example. He wanted to show her how she had been, but all Elona had seen in her younger self was weakness. A sheltered girl with a soft life, blind to the reality of business. Her girlish laughter had sounded like mockery to her old ears. Yet she had grinned through the whole ordeal, taking joy from the knowledge that this stupid girl was about to learn how to fight, whether she wanted to or not. The only thing that had elicited a real response from her had been seeing her old boyfriend. This incredulity in his eyes as he realized that they weren't compatible still brought her joy, even now, all these years later. It had been the first sacrifice on her altar of success. Cutting away useless things had become something of a hobby to her, after all. Watching him cradle his brats by the Christmas trees had left her as cold as his opinions on her years later. Well, that wasn't quite true, if she was honest. She had spent a bit of money last year to make sure that our old man got punished accordingly, foreclosing on his home and destroying his children's careers. Elona smiled at the memory. The second ghost hadn't been much worse either, showing her useless assistant's family preparing dinner and then playing games. Not once in her life had she ever felt bad about not mingling with normal people, and all she felt at the sight was contempt. They couldn't give each other big presents. Boo fucking who? Her assistant was poor because he chose to be. Instead of working, he wanted to be with his family. That was one of his main problems, and the stupid ghost thought he should be rewarded for his laziness. She wouldn't let that happen. Not now. Not ever. Looking at others, singing and laughing hadn't changed her outlook either. Elona couldn't understand why it was so important or how people could even live like that. There wasn't a single being on this planet she would trade places with. She had told Jacob a few years ago, and she was still willing to die on that hill. Family, friends, colleagues, those were all just distractions. Money and power, that would always be where true joy lied. Elona felt her lips curling into a real smile and heard the ghost across her desk clearing his throat.
The second spirit was especially wounded by your callous words,
Jacob said while shaking his head.
He was one of the driving factors of my being sent here again. Well, not that any of the other two had an objection.
Elona leaned back in her chair and put her hands behind her head. The grin on her face was as real as her calmness. She was enjoying herself. It gave her a chance to reflect, and if those ghosts appeared again, she might remember someone else she hadn't punished for long-forgotten slights. If something like that happened, it really would be a perfect evening. What she didn't need was the third ghost. Prophetic bullshit and needless fear, showing her people rejoicing after her death. Why should she care about something like that? Would a lion mind the gazelles laughing after he had passed? They should celebrate, every single one of them. Because firstly, it meant that they had managed to survive her. And secondly, their drab, dumb lives would soon be controlled by someone else. There would always be people like her on top and those like them at the bottom. They were nothing but prey. The third ghost had managed to help her in one way, though. She had pushed some projects with even more fervor, which had, in turn, increased her wealth considerably again. Part of her was looking forward to what the ghost would be showing her this time. More sick children, starving animals, maybe even the mercenaries some journalist had tried to report on, clearing out land for another one of her big projects.
I'm afraid, Elona, you won't like today's visitor as much,
the man said, and his eyes suddenly seemed to glow with an intensity she hadn't seen in years. His hands gripped the edge of her desk hard enough to leave marks.
Please, Elona, listen. This moment now is your last chance. Please, I beg you, find it in your heart to change. Now, it's still not too late. For all the years we worked together, I ask you to reconsider.
His sudden intensity shocked her, and Elona pulled her hands out from behind her head and put them in front of her chest. There was this eagerness and urge in his eyes, just like back then when he had seen something she had missed. Maybe it would be better to humor him here.
Okay. Don't worry. I'll pull back and enjoy the last few years of my life away from the levers of power. Okay?
The intensity of his gaze didn't debate. He was staring at her like a lost puppy, begging her with his eyes.
Please.
She heard him whisper.
I already said yes. Do I need to give it to you in writing? What do you want from me?
His fingers left the desk, but the grooves remained, and Elona's eyes narrowed as she spotted them. She'd have to replace the wood there. It would be expensive.
Come on. What the fuck was that?
The glow left his eyes, and his former downtrodden expression returned. Elona felt a cold chill as she saw it.
How about telling me what's about to happen so I can be prepared? For all the years I carried your useless ass up this mountain, you owe me.
Jacob shook his head for a few seconds, then stopped and looked at her again.
Okay. I would have done so no matter what you said. You see, the three ghosts were meant as a warning. They didn't come to tell you to behave better. They came to warn you of an impending catastrophe. Some people take their advice to heart and can avoid the worst-case scenario. But you, Elona, cannot. You still lie and think about how to screw everyone else over. You are incorrigible, a lost cause. At least you can be sure that what happens next is purely your own doing. No one will stand up for you. No one will defend you this time. I tried. And yet you lie to my face.
Elona spat out angrily as she rose from her chair, bending over the desk so she could get closer to him.
You always were this slimy little thing. Spineless to the end. If it were up to me, those chains you are carrying now would be twice as heavy. Go back to your masters and tell them that they have convinced me. Once I die, I'll take as many people with me as I can, and you should know how creative I can get. They'll have plenty to do in their afterlife, sorting through them all.
Her hand grabbed the letter opener, and she threw it at a translucent figure across the desk. It passed through him without resistance, and Jacob Marley just shook his head in disgust.
Have fun meeting the fourth one, then. Sadly, or maybe luckily, we will never speak again. The place I leave to will forever be out of your reach.
She spat on the floor again, lifted her fist and shook it at him as he slowly lost form and then disappeared into the darkness as the bulb in the lamp of her desk blew out and sprayed glass shards across the whole room. Only moonlight illuminated her office now, and Elona, still standing, suddenly felt exposed. She wasn't sure why, but the sensation of being seen seemed to take over. Last year, with the 3 ghosts, the world around her had fallen dark every time one of them had visited her. But this night, she stayed in her office, even though it felt less and less like the room she knew. Elona slowly walked out from behind the big desk with the fresh grooves in its wood. She was still angry about that. Someone would need to pay for it, and she already thought of ways and methods to make that person Jacob's widow. That would be fitting, right? After all, if her husband was still up to stuff in the afterlife, it was her duty to pay his debts. Elona felt her smile return as she reached the edge of the desk, but then stopped. The furthest corner of her office was the only spot not illuminated by the moonlight. She wasn't sure if that was normal, though. With all the time she had spent in here, she should have an almost photographic memory of the place and its layout, she thought. But for the life of her, she couldn't remember if that corner was always this dark. Some part of her doubted it. The longer she looked, the stranger it got. While the moonlight, coming in through the giant window behind her desk, hit almost every surface in here, it seemed to weaken the closer it got to that corner. She could see dark streaks on the marble that appeared nowhere else. Was that another scare tactic? The ghosts always pulled shit like that. She had read up on them and their ilk. Moralistic pricks, the whole bunch of them. Well, that wasn't true either. A real vengeful spirit was a different matter altogether. But those things were bound to places or objects, not traveling around making house calls. The annoying type she was dealing with couldn't really do much but scare people. So there was no danger as long as she didn't die of a heart attack. Elona pulled a small flashlight from her keychain and straightened up. If they wanted to play games, they should at least make them interesting, she thought. She turned it on and watched the light flicker as it shone toward the ceiling. Barely enough to see anything, she found. But it was still working. Slowly, Elona lowered the flashlight and then moved it toward the dark corner. Shadows fled as the light hit them. The darkness fell back, and a big smile crept onto her face. If that was all it took to destroy their plans, she had really overestimated her adversaries. This was child's play, nothing more than a prank. Her light hit the furthest corner of the room, and suddenly the smile vanished from Elona's face. The dark shadow there wasn't dissolving, no. She could see someone sitting on the white marble. At first, it looked like a bundle of dark clothing, but as soon as the light hit it, it started to move. A figure emerged, kneeling there, now slowly getting up. The shadows around the thing seemed to flow into it as it stretched its legs, then arms, then took a step. Elona's flashlight hissed and died, and in the darkness, the figure grew. It was a young man, she realized, taller than her and dressed in a dark outfit. Elona involuntarily took a step back as the figure approached her, put a hand into the jacket and pulled out the gun. She felt a cold chill. This wasn't right. All she could see of the man's face was his light brown eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. Elona felt a sudden shooting pain in her heart. This scene, it was something she had seen before. The man's long gait, his burrowing gaze, and then the racking of the pistol's slide. He was breathing heavily as he came toward her, and there was no doubt about his intent. Elona wanted to scream as her back touched the desk where her dead colleague had stood. She could hear the figure mumbling 3 words. Ones she had read over and over in all of the newspapers.
That's not right,
she hissed at him, and watched in horror as he lowered his pistol and took aim. No.
I'm not involved in that,
she managed to say, but the gun was on her before she could even finish the sentence. A voice in the back of her mind screeched at her to calm down, that this was just an illusion, nothing more than a trick. But her body didn't obey her. Elona's fingernails tried to dig into the desk as she looked at the dark barrel of the gun, and above it, the brown eyes staring at her. A shot rang out, and she felt it. The bullet pierced her body. It wasn't a dream or an illusion. She looked down and could see herself trembling as blood trickled out of a wound in her chest. The man racked the slide of the gun again and came even closer. He was maybe 2 steps away. Elona reached out to try to grab the gun, but he kept it out of her range. Its barrel sank down again, aiming at her once more.
Stop!
She tried to scream, but blood was rushing into her lungs. All that came out of her mouth was a cough, followed by a gargling sound as the next shot rang out. She felt the pain. The cold metal pierced her like ice, followed by the rush of heat spreading out from the new wound. Tears shot into her eyes as she looked up at the man who was getting ready to fire again. This wasn't right. It wasn't her lot in life. The brown eyes that were staring at her were filled with hatred. The 3rd shot rang out just as Elona's hand slipped and she slumped to the floor. 3 holes in her chest, she thought, and tasted the blood from her lungs now in her mouth. She felt like she was drowning. Her body hardly moved, and the man who had shot her stepped even closer. A hand touched her chin and forced her head up so she could look at him. He pulled back his hood, and his face changed. It was her fiancé, as young as the day when their relationship had ended.
You deserve this,"
he whispered as tears filled her eyes. Elona tried to shake her head, but he held onto her chin. The world turned grey before her eyes. She blinked and suddenly found herself sitting not on marble, but on dusty ground. Her former fiancé was gone, as was the office. Everything beside the desk she was leaning against. The pain was still here, as was the fear. She tried to growl, but her throat disobeyed her. Her hands touched her chest and felt the 3 gunshot wounds. They were dry, but painful. She lifted her head and looked ahead. Somehow, she had been transported to some kind of forest. The trees were wrong, as was the ground. It looked like someone had brought her to some safari park. Elona grabbed hold of the desk still behind her and slowly pulled herself up despite the pain. What kind of lesson was this? What should she learn from it? This was just torture. Screams erupted around her as heavy gunfire filled the air. Elona ducked reflexively and watched as suddenly people started to run through the woods close to her. Their expressions were fearful. Some were men, others women. Some were alone. Others carried children. More shouts were ringing out behind them, in a language she didn't speak. They were angry. Elona watched as bullets whizzed through the air, and the people running away fell one by one. The smell of blood filled the air. A child collapsed right in front of her. It had her eyes, her hair, and her smile. Elona looked at the same figure she had seen last year when the first ghost had shown her her past. Only this time, the kid was dying. She felt a lump in her throat as she looked at her own dead form. Dark-clad soldiers followed the fleeing masses. Their guns were new, their uniforms nondescript. Mercenaries, she realized, and felt a chill as one of them stopped right in front of her and turned his head. His eyes were blue, like the ocean. Elona tried to scream as he took a step toward her, a long knife in his hand. He grabbed her, and she felt the metal at her throat. The world turned grey again, and as she slumped down, Elona found herself kneeling on cold asphalt in a dirty, wet alley somewhere in a city. Someone was lying beside her. At first, she tried to scoot away, sure it would be her next killer. But then she stopped. The bullet wounds and cut in her throat still burned as if they were fresh. But worse was that she knew who would be in the bundle of rags that lay on the ground. She reached out and pushed some cloth aside. Beneath it was a young woman. Cuts and bruises littered her skin. One eye was swollen shut. But she still recognized her face as her own. The young woman's breath was coming out ragged as she started to convulse. Acrid smoke filled the area. Elona felt it in the cut in her throat. A stinging pain as the fumes flowed into her trachea and started to corrode her insides. She tried to protect herself, but knew it was too late. The young woman lying beside her was shaking as foam appeared between her lips. She pulled at her and turned her to her side.
"Fight it!"
Elona wanted to say it, but knew that it would be pointless. This girl never had a chance. Acrid fumes made her cough as the foam in front of the young woman's lips turned from white to red. Elona's pain was getting more and more intense with every breath she took. She felt it dissolving her flesh. The world turned grey again and again and again. She died every time. Froze to death while snow fell all around her. Starved next to her younger self as faceless people passed her by. She got run over by a car, drowned in sludge, and burned alive in a factory fire as the barred doors kept emergency services back. And yet, the wounds all stayed with her. Her hair was gone, as was most of the skin on her face. She had lost 3 fingers from frostbite on one hand, and 2 from some sickness on the other. Her clothing was in tatters, her teeth were missing, and one eye was nothing more than sludge running down her face like oozy tears. Elona had had enough. She couldn't take this anymore. Every time she found herself in a new world, suffering some kind of torture, she cried out in her mind to the ghosts, begging them to stop it. But they didn't listen. Every single part of her body was aching and bleeding, showing cuts and burns and wounds, and yet the torture didn't stop. She promised everything and anything. Elona swore she would give away all her money and live the rest of her life on the streets if they so wished. A single time freezing to death was so much better than this constant barrage of pain and fear she had to live through. 2 policemen broke her head just next to her. Her younger self got dragged into an alley. Elona cried out as the world turned grey again. Her voice had nothing human to it anymore. A single tear fell from her eye, as red as blood. And suddenly she found herself sitting on white marble, leaning against her desk. In front of her was her office, as it had been before. It was hard for her to remember. Immediately, her one eye scanned the room, looking for whatever source would kill her next. A shadow moved in the back of the office, and Elona's whole body started to tremble. Would it be the man again? The one with the gun? What else could they take from her? She looked down and could see her mangled feet and broken body. Even her mind was almost gone from the constant pain. A sound that had once been a sob came from her throat, and the shadow moved closer. She tried to straighten up, but the bullet holes in her chest ached as soon as she shifted her body. A bright, childlike chuckle reached her ears, and Elona felt hope for the first time in a long while. The figure stepped out of the shadow, and she saw her own face. So young and beautiful. It was the girl from last year, the one in the vision. But her eyes were different. They were older, much older than they should be. She recognized it in an instant and tried to move away, even though her whole body screamed in pain. A young hand grabbed Elona by the shoulder and roughly forced her back against the desk. She knew what she was looking at. Not the representation of herself she had watched die beside her all those times, but something else. The one responsible. The ghost. She tried to speak, but there was hardly anything left of her vocal cords. Instead, all she managed was a growl, which brought a wide grin to the child's face.
"Don't strain yourself,"
the girl said, still smiling, as her thumb wiped away Elona's tear.
I'm sorry.
The old woman tried to say, but the words came out of her as a grunt. The child didn't seem to mind. Her hand grabbed Elona's forehead and pinned it against the desk to force her to look at her. The smile vanished from the young face.
"No, you're not. You never were. All you are sorry for is the state you're in. Giving you half a chance, you just revert back to your old ways."
Another tear flowed from her eye as she tried to shake her head. No, she was truly sorry, more than any time before. All her greed, all those shady deals, they meant nothing to her now. She wanted to say that, needed to say it, but the child's hand clasped over her mouth.
"Didn't your colleague tell you? This is not about redemption anymore. You are irredeemable, after all. It doesn't matter what you do. You will never change. You can never change.
Those words coming from the childlike mouth made her shiver and thrash around. No, the ghost was wrong. She could change. She had already changed. She had cried for the people dying around her just as much as for herself. The child chuckled humorlessly.
You're mistaken in another way as well. I am not a ghost or spirit or anything like that. I'm just an amalgamation. All the hate and pain you brought upon this world, it all has to stay somewhere, right? The people your actions killed, the hurt you caused, every man, woman, and child that died while cursing your name. I am their last wish.
Elona shook her head and felt her shattered skull moving against a hand still holding her.
What you have been through tonight will be nothing compared to what is to follow.
The young girl warned her, and Elona felt the tremors running through her body getting worse.
This here was just a little taste. Let's call it a gift. It is for everything you have done, everything you wanted to do, and also for the last thing you will do.
The sound of chains coming from below suddenly filled her ears. Elona tried to get up, but the hand holding her down stopped her broken body in place. Metal touched her arms and legs, wrapped around them, and began to glow. A scream formed in her throat, then came out as a howl. The girl stepped back as more and more chains wrapped around Elona, now lifting her up. She felt it, the pain of burning metal on her flesh. Elona could see the office beneath her. An old woman was lying hunched over her desk. Her body. She needed to get back in there. Another scream escaped her throat. Pain blurred her vision. The old woman at the desk didn't move. She wasn't breathing anymore. Elona cried out, and the chains grew stiff with a hiss. Bound in place, she hung there, screaming and thrashing against the metal holding her. Below, a child started laughing again.
You will stay here, Elona Scrooge. A vengeful spirit, driven insane by her own deeds. You will frighten and terrorize whoever is unlucky enough to enter this room, until one day they will seal you in. This is your legacy, your life's worth.
She thrashed around, still trying to wriggle out and get back to her body. The pain was turning the whole world red. But she didn't care. This couldn't be. It had to be fake. Every time she moved her body, the chains around her constricted and started to glow. Elona heard the hissing of her own flesh as she struggled. Just one more day. That was all she needed, to show them. All of them. Below her, the child chuckled again and then slowly dissolved into the shadows. Elona screamed, but her shouts turned into high-pitched cries. She thrashed around, and while hours passed, the pain never abated, her howls becoming madder and madder. Eternity awaited her, strung up and bound by these chains. Thoughts flashed like white lightning through the red world surrounding her. She needed, wanted, would. Elona let out a scream that felt like it could shatter the walls, but all anyone could see was the curtains behind the desk moving slowly.